Let me ask you a question that sounds simple but really isn't. How many retirees do you think actually have $1 million invested, not counting their home, not their house, not their condo, not the place they live in, just pure investable assets? Stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts. The money that can actually produce income. If you had to guess, what would you say? Half of retirees, a third? Maybe just a small elite group, because depending on where you get your information, you can find numbers that make it seem like millionaires are everywhere. Headlines tell us that millions of Americans are millionaires now. Social media makes it feel like everyone over 60 is sitting on a mountain of money. But when you slow down and ask one very specific question, how many retirees have $1 million invested, excluding their home? The answer gets a lot more uncomfortable and a lot more interesting. You've probably seen statistics that say something like 18% of American households are millionaires. That sounds massive, almost 1 in 5. But the first thing most people don't realize is that those numbers almost always include home equity. And that matters more than almost anything else in this conversation. Because for most Americans, their home is their wealth. It's the biggest asset they will ever own. Strip that away, and the picture changes dramatically. That's what we're going to unpack today. Not just the headline numbers, but what they really mean for retirees, for income, and for the kind of life that money can actually support. To understand this properly, we need to zoom out before we zoom in. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, which is widely considered the gold standard for wealth data in the United States, roughly 18% of households have a net worth of $1 million or more. That's where the headline comes from. But the median household net worth in America isn't anywhere close to that. It's roughly in the neighborhood of $200,000. And once you exclude home equity, that median collapses. We're not talking about a small dip. It drops to well under $60,000. That single adjustment tells you almost everything you need to know about how much of America's wealth is tied up in housing. For the majority of households, the home isn't just part of their net worth, it is their net worth. Outside of the top tiers of wealth, many families have half, or even more than half, of their total net worth locked inside the walls of the place they live. So when someone says, "Look, there are so many millionaires now," the first question should always be, does that include the house? Because if it does, and it almost always does, the number of people with $1 million in assets they can actually draw income from is much smaller. Once you exclude home equity, estimates suggest the share of households with $1 million or more drops into the single digits, somewhere in the range of 8 to maybe 10% overall. And that's across all households, not just retirees. This is where context really starts to matter. Because your house absolutely counts as wealth. There's no argument there. It provides shelter, stability, and long-term value. But when people ask about investable net worth, what they're really asking is a different question. They're asking, how much money do I have that can actually support my lifestyle if I stop working? Think about two households that both show up as millionaires on paper. One household owns a modest $200,000 home and has $800,000 invested. The other owns an $800,000 home but only has $200,000 invested. On paper, they look identical. Same net worth, same headline number. But their financial realities are completely different. If we apply a withdrawal rate of roughly 4.7%, the first household can generate close to $38,000 a year from their investments. The second household is closer to $9,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a lifestyle difference. So why does this matter so much? It's because income is what you live on. Your home equity, as valuable as it is, doesn't pay for groceries, travel, or healthcare bills unless you sell it or borrow against it. Your investments, on the other hand, are designed to do exactly that. They are the engine that powers your retirement income stream. This is a critical distinction for anyone planning for their future. It's easy to look at a rising home value and feel wealthy, and you are on paper. But feeling wealthy and having a secure income for 30 years are two very different things. Understanding the difference between total net worth and investable net worth is the key to creating a retirement plan that actually works. It's not about being pessimistic. It's about being realistic and prepared. This is why it's so important to separate your investable assets from your home equity. Tracking your net worth in two versions, one with your home and one without, gives you a much clearer picture of your financial independence. That second number, the one without your house, tells you what kind of income your assets can realistically produce, especially if you plan to stay in your home long term. Now, let's focus on retirees. These are people who've had decades to save and invest, so you'd expect their numbers to be pretty solid. And they are, but maybe not as much as you'd guess. Looking at the data for people aged 65 to 69, the median investable net worth, meaning the exact middle of the pack, is around $240,000. That means half have more and half have less. If you move up to the 75th percentile, that number jumps to between $700,000 and $800,000. And at the 90th percentile, you're looking at over $2 million in investable assets. What's really interesting is that as you climb that wealth ladder, the importance of home equity shrinks. For high net worth retirees, their home might only be 20 to 30% of their total wealth. The rest is in financial assets designed to generate income. This isn't an accident. It's the result of deliberate planning, high savings rates, and the magic of long-term compounding. So where does $1 million in investable assets put you? For a retiree, $1 million, excluding their home, usually lands them somewhere between the 75th and 90th percentiles. It's well above average, but not super rare. Based on survey data, about 20 to 25% of retiree households have $1 million or more in financial assets. That's roughly 1 in every 5. This number often surprises people. Some think it should be lower, others higher. The truth is somewhere in that uncomfortable middle. But here's where it gets even trickier. If you only look at retirement accounts like 401ks and IRAs, so the percentage of millionaires drops to around 3%. This is the stat you often see in headlines about 401k millionaires. And frankly, it's misleading. Why? Because our financial lives are fragmented. Most people don't keep all their money in one place. You might have $400,000 in a 401k, $300,000 in an IRA, and another $300,000 split between a brokerage account and cash savings. That person is an investably said millionaire, but they won't show up as one in any single company's report. This fragmentation is a huge reason why getting a clear number is so difficult. Wealth is spread across different accounts, institutions, and asset types. There's no single database that tracks it all. You report your income on your tax return, but you don't report your net worth. So, researchers have to piece everything together from surveys and partial data. And that data has its own problems. High net worth households are often underrepresented in these surveys. Some refuse to participate, others might underreport their assets, and sometimes, very high values get lumped together to protect privacy. This makes it hard to get a precise reading at the top. Then there's the challenge of valuation. How do you put a number on a pension, a small business, or a life insurance policy? There's no single, consistent method. Then there's timing. Net worth isn't static. It swings with the markets every single day. The surveys that give us this data are only done every few years. By the time the results are published, the financial world has already changed. Think about it this way. Has anyone from the government ever officially asked you to log into all your financial accounts and report the exact balances? Probably not. Even if they did, how accurate would that number really be? Would you remember to include that old 401k from a job you had 15 years ago? What about that small brokerage account you opened and then forgot existed? This happens more than you'd think. There are tens of millions of forgotten retirement accounts in the U.S. holding trillions of dollars. So before you start comparing your finances to some national average, ask yourself a more important question. Have you actually accounted for everything you own? You might be closer to your financial goals than you realize. Most of the wealth data we rely on comes from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. It's a highly respected survey that polls a few thousand households and then uses statistical methods to estimate the wealth of over 130 million households across the country. It tries to capture everything, from checking accounts and retirement plans to the value of a family business. But at the end of the day, it's still a survey. It's based on self-reported information, which makes it an estimate, not a hard fact. This is where the conversation needs to shift from just numbers to what they actually mean. Because wealth isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's deeply personal and contextual. $1 million can fund a very comfortable, even luxurious lifestyle in a low-cost area. But that same $1 million in a major city like New York or San Francisco might feel like just enough to get by. Economists call this the idea of relative income. The real value of your money depends on what it can buy, where you live, and how it stacks up against the people around you. Charlie Munger, the brilliant partner to Warren Buffett, once said that the desire to get rich fast is dangerous. But the desire to get rich by constantly comparing yourself to others is even worse. He knew that true wealth is about freedom and independence, not about winning some imaginary scoreboard competition. $1 million doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, and its value changes dramatically depending on where you are. What truly matters is what that money allows you to do and the peace of mind it brings you. So, let's put all the pieces together. If you include home equity in the calculation, about 18% of U.S. households are millionaires. But if you take home equity out of the equation, which many financial planners do, because you easily spend it, that number drops to around 8 to 10%. Now, if we look specifically at retirees, about 20 to 25% have $1 million or more in investable assets. But here is another twist. Only about 3% have that much in a single retirement account. The huge difference between these numbers comes down to how wealth is spread out across different accounts, how we define millionaire, and the personal context. The most important question isn't whether you've crossed some arbitrary seven-figure line. The real question is whether your assets can support the life you want to live. A great way to figure this out is to start tracking your net worth regularly. I suggest calculating it in two ways. One version that includes the equity in your home and another that excludes it. That second number is what really tells you about your potential for generating income. Doing a quick check-in every quarter can help you stay on track without getting obsessed with daily market fluctuations. And doing a deep dive once a year will show you your long-term progress and help you make sure your money is working for your goals. Your assets include everything you own that has value. Your home, your car, your retirement accounts like a 401k or an IRA, your brokerage accounts, even valuable art or collectibles. Your liabilities are everything you owe: your mortgage, your car loan, student loans, credit card debt. So, net worth is simply what's left over after you subtract all your debts from all your assets. Here's the catch. Imagine someone owns a $2 million house in a high-cost of-living area, but they have a $1.5 million mortgage on it. They might also have $100,000 in a retirement account. Technically, their net worth isn't $1 million. But what about someone who owns a $1.2 million house outright with no mortgage? On paper, they're a millionaire. But here's the kicker. Their house is their primary residence. They live in it. It's not generating any income for them. In fact, it costs them money in property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. This is what we call an illiquid asset. You can't easily spend your house to buy groceries or pay for a vacation. To access that money, you'd have to sell it, and then you'd still need a place to live. Or you could take out a loan against it, like a home equity line of credit, but that just adds a new liability to your balance sheet. So, while having a high net worth is great, a lot of it can be tied up in things that don't actually support your day-to-day lifestyle or your retirement goals. This is a huge distinction that often gets completely glossed over. This leads us to a much more powerful concept: investable assets. These are the assets that are working for you, the ones that are generating income or are poised to grow. Think stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and rental properties. These are the assets you can actually use to fund your retirement. You can sell them relatively easily to cover your expenses without having to sell the roof over your head. So when we talk about financial freedom, we're not really talking about being a net worth millionaire. We are talking about having enough investable assets to generate the income you need to live the life you want without having to work. This is the core idea behind the financial independence. Retire early movement or FIRE. And that brings me to my next point. Stop fixating on $1 million as some magic number. It's a nice round figure, but it's totally meaningless without context. What you really need to figure out is your number. This is the amount of investable assets required to generate the income you need at a withdrawal rate you're comfortable with, in the place you want to live. For some people, that number might be well over $1 million, especially if you live in an expensive city and have a high-cost lifestyle. For others, it might be less. Maybe you plan to live in a low-cost home living area, or your desired lifestyle is more modest. Your number is personal to you. Instead of obsessing over a generic milestone, focus on the things you can actually control. You can control your savings rate, how much of your income you set aside each month. You can control your spending habits, making conscious choices about where your money goes. You can control your investment strategy, like making sure your portfolio is properly diversified. The markets are going to fluctuate. That's a given. Your portfolio value will go up and down, sometimes moving above and below certain milestones on a daily basis. That's completely normal. What truly matters is the long-term direction, not the day-to-day noise. Are you consistently saving and investing? Is your plan on track? That's the real progress. And remember to contextualize your wealth. $1 million in rural Kansas buys a very different life than $1 million in San Francisco. The cost of living, healthcare expenses, and your personal values all shape what that money can actually do for you. So, the next time you see a headline about the growing number of millionaires, I want you to pause and think critically. Ask yourself, what assets are being included in that calculation? What's being excluded? And what does that number actually mean for someone's real, day-to-day life and financial security? Because at the end of the day, this isn't about bragging rights or hitting an arbitrary number. It's about creating freedom, security, and choice in your life. The only number that really matters is the one that gets you to the life you truly want to live. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Does this perspective surprise you? Does it change how you think about saving for retirement? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel. If you're new here, consider subscribing for new videos on personal finance every week. And if you know someone who might benefit from this perspective, feel free to share it with them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.